Hey guys, what's up? Week 445. Let's dive right into the reviews, and the first one up is from Celluloid Dreams. They've been putting out some really cool stuff lately, some cool giallos and things of that nature, and this one is a Hyena in the Safe. And I must admit that this is one that I'd actually not heard of, maybe in passing, but I did not know much about this one. Made in 67, not released till 68, shot on location of the grounds of a really important historical location in Italy. I can't think of what the house is called. It's changed over time, but it's a really beautiful location, and it's definitely featured predominantly in this film right here, or prominently in this one here, Hyena in the Safe. Also a crazy title. This is actually by the director of the Gestapo's Last Orgy, which I believe is the 88 film I was trying to think of last week when I was talking about Nazi exploitation films. But yeah, and he also did a couple, spaghetti westerns. The Blind Man, which is one that I actually really enjoy. I believe he did that one. Really kind of, I don't even call it acid spaghetti western, but it's a really bizarre one and not your typical spaghetti western. But we got a Hyena in the Safe. Now this is definitely a marriage of, the commentary says the same, but this is the first thing I thought of a crime kind of caper film mixed with the giallo, which is a great combo. This is before the Bird with the Crystal Plumage hit in 1970, and definitely defined the the stereotypes, as the commentator says, and I would agree with that. Before that, the giallos had their own kind of flavor, and things like Umberto Lenzi's were a little bit different, and of course Mario Bava's were a little bit different, and tons of people had dabbled into the genre and done their own thing. This one did remind me a bit of the Mabuse movies from Germany, which came out in, I believe, the 60s, early 60s. Those the German CCC Mabuse movies, not of course the original silent ones from the original silent one from the 30s or wherever the original Dr. Mabuse was in the sequel. I'm talking about the 60s run from CCC. Yeah, it does have that kind of element too, more maybe so the crime and the traps and things of that nature. But super intriguing movie here, where we have these kind of six kind of strange characters showing up to this beautiful location, this giant mansion area, and they all have six keys. They're all there to open this safe, and if all six keys aren't there and all the people aren't present, then there's diamonds and jewels within the safe that get covered in some sort of radiation, and they're basically, everybody's contaminated, the diamonds are contaminated, so they need everybody there to do it. Right away, things aren't right. The guy who's supposed to be at the mansion, Boris, is dead. His wife is there. Supposedly she comes out, his girlfriend comes out and tells him, I'm going to take care of his share. There's a gambler that won his share from somebody else that's supposed to be there, and one of the guys who is the safecracker showed up with his fiance. So shit has a bunch of red flags almost immediately. This creates a lot of red herrings for the audience, and you think there's a lot of kind of ends that you want to explore, possibly who is the killer, or who's going to be the killer, who's not to be trusted. It doesn't take long for someone to end up dead. They're kind of tortured by the other people, not in like a tortured kind of way, psychological in a lot of aspects, and withdrawal and all that kind of element there. But somebody ends up dead, and you do see some hands push that person, if you know what I'm saying. But yeah, and then the rest of the film is about greed, these characters kind of manipulating each other to try to get all the keys and all that kind of stuff like that. A good whodunit, and nice little plots, twists and turns. The acting is really well done, especially considering that most of these people were not long-term established actors, or they say that in the commentary and all the special features. They say this is kind of really amazing that this turned out so well in terms of, a lot of the filmmaking and stuff, because a lot of the people weren't like longtime editors like a lot of the Italian film industry, where they edited 50, 60, 70 films. The director only directed a handful of films, like 10, 11 films, so it's not something like, he was super, prolific in comparison to some of his contemporaries. So a lot of these people involved with this weren't the big kind, like, people that had these prolific careers. So it was kind of a little bit smaller kind of people involved with this that didn't go on to do a million movies, although a couple of them did. So that's interesting aspect. The fashion is right up front and center. It's the late 60s, right? It's about to be the 70s. So the fashion is still very prevalent, especially you have these rich people all dressed in their style. It's definitely like heavily focused on, as is the location of the movie too, like I mentioned that. There's all sorts of beautiful kind of like camera moves and things like that, and traps and elaborate kills, and one of them is directly out of like kind of a Mabuse movie. But overall, I thought the Hyena in the Safe was really good. There's a nice little twist at the end that I absolutely loved. It's kind of a double twist. Don't want to spoil anything, but one of the twists I love, one of them I didn't like. But it kind of has a character kind of go completely psychedelically mad. I think that this that scene right there would definitely go well with the Umberto Lenzi, Carol Baker kind of giallo set that Severin put out, because those movies are, a lot of those are just about kind of gaslighting and driving somebody completely insane. And then more so in that movie those movies are basically all that. But this scene is really well done. I enjoy the characters. It's not overly sexual. I mean, there's sexual politics and stuff playing in the movie and things of that nature, and you know, and whatnot, and people using their sexuality to manipulate others. But there's not really like a graphic sex film like a lot of the other giallos at the times, or any gialli at the time. But you know, it does have its own flavor. It doesn't feel like the stuff that would come in the 70s, where it's the black glove killer and things of that nature. As the commentator says, like it's so hard listening to all the features and you go to talk about it. Like they're saying everything that you would come to mind to say. But I could talk about the movie and what I felt. I thought it was well done. It was well acted, like the script, like the characters, and some of them die when you don't really expect it. And some of them die pretty coldly. There's a decent amount of special features on here, including a commentary track by film critic Guido Hinkle. Good commentary, puts a lot of information into this, did a lot of good research, and you could tell on that, and shares the research with, of course. 7 Guests for a Massacre interview featurette with Cesare Canevari, that's the director, Sandro Pizzicero, and Nini Della, and Nina Della, Miss Caronia, Adriana Morlacci, and Diego Pistali. And the first part is with the director. He talks about his career, how he got involved with this and whatnot in the film, and things of that nature. Filming with for the rich people, and filming in a room he shouldn't have filmed in. And then the second part is basically people talking about the locations and things of that nature, and setting up for it and all that stuff. And then we have Schrodinger's Diamonds, which is the duplicitous mystery of Hyena in the Safe, video essay by Andy Marshall Roberts. It's a very good video essay. I'm not sure if I said Schrodinger's name right, but that's the kind of the concept, right, where you have the cat in the box, and there's a live cat in the box and a dead cat in the box. In reality, you can just open the box and figure it out, but the hypothetically is the cat alive or dead. Whorehouse on Highway 5 kind of talked about that. I think maybe the sequel to that, the later sequel, kind of talk about that theory, that idea of thinking and whatnot. And he starts his video essay with that and does a really good job. It's quite informative and pretty decent. It's like 36 minutes. It's a great video essay. And then we have The Mysteries of Villa Topiz, which is about the place, walking around and showing locations, what's changed, all that kind of thing like that. Very good film in, of course, Italian with English subtitles. It never was dubbed in English. Didn't get a wide release, so a lot of people did not actually get to see it. So coming soon, we have Black Belly the Tarantula, which is really cool. Really good, solid giallo, more in the crime vein than a lot of the other giallis. And then we have The Case of the Bloody Irish and Short Night of the Glass Dolls, two great ones, especially Short Night of the Glass Dolls. Would highly recommend picking that one up from Celluloid Dreams. Nice company that's relatively new. This is their third release, and I think they're working on a fourth. Highly recommend it. Check it out. All right, next up here is from a new company, Carmen Lobola. And this is The Forgotten Pistolero, starring Leonard Mann. And I made a mistake last movie I was just talking about. I said that the director of that did Blind Man. No, this director did Blind Man. Makes more sense on that mistake. But the director last time did do Gestapo's Last Orgy. Man, sometimes I get confused on everything with all the notes and trying to remember everything. But Forgotten Pistolero here. Leonard Mann is no stranger to these films. He's done a handful of, spaghetti westerns and whatnot. And this is kind of your standard, I'd say revenge story. But the things that really stand out here is you got a decent amount of bad guys, you have a lot of high drama, and you have a lot of high tragedy within here, which kind of makes it a more of an emotional ride. But the score is absolutely phenomenal. It's one of the best things about the movie, to be honest. I think the score really steals the movie. It's kind of an earworm. It gets stuck in your head. It's very dramatic and touching, in line with a lot of the classic spaghetti westerns that we've seen before. So Leonard Mann is a man that kind of travels. He's a gunfighter. He doesn't really know his original, kind of life or whatnot has happened. It's kind of a question mark. So one day a childhood friend does find him and talks to him. They kind of run into each other. And he explains to him that I know where you came from, I know your family, I know what happened to your father, how he was killed, and how you escaped from the home that was burnt down and all that kind of thing like that. And I know where your sister is. I was to marry her, but she was forced to marry kind of a wimpy guy, and Luciano Rossi, who is a classic, Italian actor who pops up in, a couple of Fulci movies as kind of always a crazy person. It's kind of his role that he always plays, just kind of a bizarre character. And I know, I believe he was what is the one where ends on the rooftop? Maybe it's the Death Walks on High Heels or Death Walks at Midnight. I can't remember which one, but he ends up playing kind of a baddie in that, a very memorable baddie. But he's in here as well. And basically, essentially, what happens is a story of revenge that these two team up and they kind of start to infiltrate and try to find these bad guys. And it becomes complicated because their mother is implicated in the murder, and they show the whole flashback. And and it ends with this high drama and big nice shootout at the end. And it actually was a pretty rewarding and touching spaghetti western that doesn't always normally have like. There's all different styles. I know a lot of them are very dramatic, and they do get to the point where it's high drama, especially like stuff like Once Upon a Time in the West, which is probably like the best of its genre. But sometimes they're a little hokey and silly and fun too. This one's more in the former with I don't want to say it's as good as Once Upon a Time in the West, but I did appreciate the drama and the characters, and I always like Leonard Mann. He's not like an all-time standout favorite. If I'm not mistaken, off the top of my head, I think Leonard Mann, was in Night School, if I'm not mistaken, the American film as the detective. But I try to do these a lot of times with just like free base and remember everything. I do take some notes, but a lot of times I try to just go into it, and I don't want these. I want it to feel almost kind of spontaneous, like you're having a conversation. But sometimes I feel like the minimal amount of research that I do for these and other things I do more research. It sometimes I feel like I should kind of dive into a little bit more on that aspect. But the problem with a lot of these movies is like, yes, it's a good cast, yes, it's a good score, but it's a standard revenge kind of style story with reveals and characters having these kind of big emotions, and it ends in a tragic way that makes it very memorable. But I just don't have that much to dive into. As far as the features, what we have here is the English language version and the Italian with hard subtitles, and you have original trailer and a Leonard Mann interview. So not too much to look into. And it does have a bunch of familiar faces that you'll see pop up as extras in like spaghetti westerns along those lines. But yeah, pretty decent one. I enjoyed it. Good, nice release from a relatively new catalog here. Carambola. It's a Diabolic release here. Demented is kind of diving into this, and I think Diabolic is also behind like the Cauldron line and things like that. But good, looks great too. It sounds great. I opted to watch the English version, which is kind of how I always watch my Italian kind of spaghetti westerns if I can. Okay, we have one from Cult Epics here, and this is School in the Crosshairs, Obayashi film here, which I did cover for 1981, but seeing it got a stateside Blu-ray, I figured we'd dive into the film again. Obayashi, again, most famous for Houseu, I think, among Western audience, but he's been making movies, in the 70s, and I think this is what they said his fourth or fifth film. Actually, he's made a couple TV horror films, like Cute Devil and Legend of the Devil Cat, I think Devil Catwoman or something along those lines for 83. But yeah, School in Crosshairs is another one I think is fairly popular amongst that. And this is definitely kind of like in the fantasy kind of, I don't want to say like girl power kind of coming of age, like kind of storyline here. The lead actress was in the Sailor Suit and Machine Gun Girl, which is a really fun, cool movie. What was that company? Katawa, I can never remember the name, but they put out a lot of cool stuff. A lot of pretty, intense movies. I think they were behind The Beast Must Die and things of that nature. But it's a good company, and they have a really good library, and this is another one that's in here. So if you've seen his films, Obayashi's kind of movies, they're definitely like really cool, unique, weird special effects, and they definitely have a fantasy element. Almost all of them, they're have that element, and he plays with black and white and color a lot here, and this one is no different. So a lot of people kind of go black and white. But one day we have this really highly intelligent girl, and we also have a character named Koji, who is, more of an athletic type, not great on grades and things. And they come from two different backgrounds and families. Koji's father is actually played by a really good character actor who pops up in a lot of these Japanese movies, and he's a good character in this one as well. So one day she's at school and they're walking kind of out, and there's a little boy who goes in front of a bus and or a truck, and she seems to stop it with her mind and rewind time. They both seem to think they see that and feel that, but it doesn't necessarily, they kind of downplay it until, eventually there's no way they can. But, Koji starts winning in his sports activities thanks to her, and pretty soon enough, there is a mysterious new girl that comes into school, and she starts to kind of take control, and she seems to have similar powers to our lead here. And that's when we kind of have this fascist element come into the school, where we have these hall monitors, basically, that are kind of overtaking everyone out, and anybody that stands up to them has a mysterious accident. So they're even going as far as singhailing, and they kind of have this big fascist state where these kids have been turned into these Nazis and manipulated to kind of do all these things like that. The commentary is interesting that they point out that Obayashi kind of grew up during like the World War II, so he saw this stuff kind of firsthand, Japan, and the commentator mentions that he relaying Obayashi's story that he heard, that Obayashi's uncle said something to a police officer, a family friend or something. They're standing there, and he says, I think Japan's going to lose this war, and I think it's good for Japan. And then the next day he disappeared, but he came back and he had like bruised ribs and he had beaten him up. So that kind of idea, that fascism, that government state where you can't say whatever you want, and they're focusing on people that misbehave and all these things, and it's all uniform. But you lose your creativity in that aspect as well. But we do have this kind of mysterious kind of space guy that comes to her from the stars, and he's got this silver hair, and he's kind of like a Dracula-esque character, kind of pulling the strings, and he's responsible. We have this big fantastical showdown with really wild and weird special effects. I don't know exactly how you would do them. I don't want to say rotoscoping, but it's definitely drawn with on the screen. It's not your typical stuff here, but it does have this whole like kind of lighthearted, fantastical, fun element that I do enjoy. I don't think it's as good as something like Hausu, and it doesn't fit in line with something like I like as much as Cute Devil, but I do think it's a really good, strong movie, and I think it will appeal to a lot of the audience, especially if they're big into anime. I think this is essentially just a live-action anime movie, which you don't really see exactly nowadays, and especially with these kind of fun little superhero-esque qualities to them. But we have a 2K transfer and restoration, audio commentary by film critic Max Robinson. Good commentary, although it is not packed to the brim. There's a lot of downtime, where he is not filling it in. It's not horrible, though. It's a good commentary with good information. Sailor Suits and Sound visual essay by Philip Jeffries. This is really good because it talks about the life and times of, I think, the lead actress in here and her possible husband, and they talk about their music career and her big hits and things of that nature and all that kind of stuff like that. If I'm not mistaken, I think the person who did the score was married to our lead actress here, if I'm not mistaken. But and then her like kind of record deals dropped and all that kind of stuff goes into her whole life. And then Obayashi film poster gallery, theatrical trailer, new and improved English subtitles, new slipcover designed by Sam Smith. So if you like this film and you want a stateside release, I would recommend picking it up. It has LPCM2 stereo, Dolby Digital 5.1, and DTS 5.1. So you got 3 sound mixes on here, which is nice. I don't remember if the Third Window Pictures had a 5.1 sound mix, so that might be new to this release. But good stuff. I would recommend Obayashi's films. And Cult Epics also put out one already, his motorbike, Her Island, and they're working on The Girl Who Leapt Through Time for 83. So looking forward to checking that out as well. Okay, this next one here is from Radiance Films, and this is from 1956. This is a Greek film, and this is The Ogre of Athens. And this is a really interesting film here. And it does start off a little bit slow, but it's all kind of established in the characters. And I'm not saying it's meaningless or boring or anything of that nature, but it took me to the final act to kind of register and put in place what this movie is to me. And it really came together in that final kind of really depressing, kind of dark, memorable scene. But The Ogre of Athens is kind of a mistaken identity thing here. Now, listening to the commentary and the supplemental material, you learn that during this time that Greece, probably 5 or 6 years, half a decade before, had just gotten over like a civil war. So there's a lot of deaths within their culture. So that is the backdrop of this. And there's a lot of, poverty and of that nature. People that, are in groups and want to come together, and hopelessness and all those things of that nature. But there's this character that has kind of, maybe he's like a John Dillinger or Bonnie and Clyde character where he commits these crimes, but he's kind of looked at as kind of a local folk hero amongst the people, and that is the Ogre. We also have a mild-mannered kind of like civil servant who gets like a rent control department and things of that nature. He's kind of just a very mundane, boring life. He lives alone. He doesn't have many people to talk to. He's kind of, nerdy in that aspect. The thing is, on the way home from work, he realizes in the newspaper he looks exactly like the Ogre. He's wanted for these crimes. He looks just like this big-time criminal, and it's kind of a mistaken identity. So they start chasing him. He ends up running into this bar and the cabaret, essentially. And this is where the huge chunk of this movie takes place. This is where we meet all our other primary characters in the film. And in this cabaret, we have, these characters, these kind of small bit criminals, and, they're in affairs amongst each other. And we have this guy who's running the whole thing, and he's in love with this young girl that he says he raised and whatnot. And he's kind of like a blubbering kind of baby, but very emotional man. And he starts to, kind of fall. This ogre, this fake ogre here, they believe it's him, and they want his name on this job that they're going to do, and they're putting all their hope in here and their desires, and they want to move forward. And you learn a little bit about them later on. So this character is kind of lost in this idea that, he's an absolute nobody, but now he's being feared, he's being respected, he's being talked to like a human, he's being the center of attention. And there's this really good scene in the film where you get a taste of kind of like Greek culture where these characters have these like dances and they move really slow, and it's not a dance that I've ever seen any other culture do in films or any of that nature. So and there's a point where he tries to mimic it, this outsider finally coming through and being a part of something. But what really kind of bothers me is it's like, not bothers me in a bad way, that gets to me, I would say, that has an emotional impact on me, as we have this character who is like this kind of quiet character who's going to live this mundane life until this kind of fluke, this accident happens, and by that nature he kind of embraces it, and at one point he is kind of willing not to say that he isn't the ogre when he's caught, and you're like, oh, that's kind of a powerful moment. But as it progresses, he has a chance to walk away and he doesn't, and it ends in tragedy, fittingly, perfectly, and you don't blame him for what he did, although it's not the reasonable thing to do. It's the cinematic storytelling thing to do, and I think it's perfect. I thought the lead performance was great. In fact, I thought all the performances were great. I thought it was emotional. I thought it was touching. I thought the dialogue was great when he says something, we were all bad, why did you come to us, why did you get involved with us, and he's kind of pleading with him and apologizing with him all at the same time, his anger and sadness all mixed in, as the crime guy yells at this guy who he once thought was somebody of mass importance. But I would recommend this film. I think it's pretty great. I think it's interesting, and I think it's unique. And a lot of the Greek films I have seen have been exploitation or horror films, or maybe a spy film here and there. So I haven't seen any other, I guess you'd say, like mainstream drama or art films. And I think it's quite good. I think it's entertaining. I don't know. Greece is kind of strange how they put genres on their movies. They call everything genre. It's not like all the film noir, the thrillers, the horror, the sci-fi. It all goes together. That's just genre films. And I don't know where I'd put this, because it doesn't really fit. It's not really film noir. I wouldn't even call anybody a femme fatale, that kind of idea, but it is definitely this drama, kind of somewhat crime film, which I would highly recommend, and entertaining, and it keeps your interest too, considering a huge chunk of this movie is in this cabaret. But as far as the special features are concerned, we have introduction by Jonathan Frezin, a new interview with Greek film expert Dimitris Papanikolaou on the golden age of Greek cinema, which is interesting because he talks about this director's career, movies that came previous that could have influenced this, or how the critics looked at this film, all that kind of stuff. They have a new interview with critic Christiana Newland, newly filmed improved subtitles, translation, reversible sleeve featuring designs based on original posters, limited edition booklet featuring new writings by Andreas Giannopoulos. I have trouble with Greek, and extract from Jonathan Frazin's Freedom. But Frazen does talk about this movie and the aspect that he was a writer, and he saw a few movies early in his kind of writing career and in college and stuff, and he based a lot on this movie, that this movie had a general impact on him, and it wasn't that well known in the Western world, and he's so happy that it's getting a release. And he talked about the characters and their motivations and things of that nature, and it is an interesting film. It is definitely in a political aspect as well, but I took away the human aspects, and the people talking about the film do a good job in discussing it and breaking it down. But again, it's a movie that you do have to have some context, so that helps, with the backdrop of how these people are so hopeless. But recommend The Ogre of Athens. Great film. I really enjoyed it. Again, Radiant strikes good. Okay, this next one is from Dread Central here, and this is Ed Kemper, The True Story of American Psycho. Now, this is actually written by the guy who wrote the Ted Bundy and Ed Gein movies, which came out in the early 2000s. So that's kind of wild that he had another one of these scripts. I think it was maybe he wrote that a long time ago, and they kind of polished it up. It's directed by Chad Farron, and Chad Farron is a director who's been working since like 2000, 2002 or something along the lines. I remember first seeing his film Unspeakable that Troma looked out. He did Someone's Knocking at My Door. He did Scalper, the old ones. He's done a lot of films. Parasites, and I would say that Chad Farron is actually one of the underrated kind of indie guys. I wouldn't call him necessarily super indie. He did the Pig Killer movie about Willie Picton with Jake Busey. He does a really solid job on a budget. And Ed Kemper, I was a little unsure on this one, to be honest, because it's hard to capture, real life serial killers and get a tone right or any of that nature. But I was pleasantly surprised with this one. They managed to do a period piece. Ed Kemper was killing co-ed. They called him the co-ed killer in the 70s, and maybe 60s, 70s in California. So, his mother worked on campus, and he'd kind of drive around that area and pick up hitchhikers and kill them. He was infamous for cutting off their heads and having sexual intercourse with the decapitated heads. That's Edmund Kemper's kind of MO, if you guys didn't know. But he was also known as kind of a clumsy bumblebutt, if they kind of called him that. I mean, like stuff like Last Podcast would call him that. And so the lead actor in here, I want to make sure I get his name. Is it Brandon Kirk? I think it is. Sorry about this. This is Brandon Kirk. I have to give my hats off to this guy. He somehow got this demeanor of chilling, charming, and bumbling all together, and he looks the part, and his acting and all that kind of stuff like that. I just was really impressed with it. The mother also plays a tremendous role. She's in like Black Room from '82, and she's also in Conan. She plays the witch, Conan the Barbarian. So like these two performances are at the heart and center of this film, and they do a really spectacular job. I actually think Brink Stevens is in here too, good role, but these two kind of carry this whole movie on themselves. And they do talk about in the commentary, they have the writer and the lead actor talking about the commentary on here, and they mentioned that kind of having that tone where he needs to make a movie too, not just a biopic or being super dark and disturbing. It has to have this entertaining quality about it too. And some people go like, well, that's exploitive. And I mean, like in nature, I guess all these serial killer movies would be exploitive to a certain time. And I have watched some true crime stories where I'm like, that just felt like shitty exploitation, preachy stuff, and this I don't. I feel like this is actually a genuinely solid movie that portrays a killer, and I think a fairly true story. They do little details where the woman actually let him out, unlocked the door when he actually locked his keys in these aspects. I feel bad for the victims, and a lot of movies you don't, like in a serial killer film, it's not like a Jason movie where you want to cheer on the kills. You want to feel bad for the victims, right? You want to genuinely feel bad for them for the most part, except like unless it's Henry with the plug it in, in that aspect. But they make you pay for that shortly after that scene. Right after that they do. But no, I just was really happy with it. As Joe Castro did the special effects, and the special effects are kind of mixed with digital effects. And I'm not a huge digital effects kind of guy. You guys know that. But the problem with digital effects is when you critique them, the thing is, there's digital effects in the movie you don't even know are digital effects. And they talk about that in the commentary. Well, they did put this lake here. I was like, I didn't even notice that lake was put there. And the woods there, and the mountains there. So it's like, the aspect is that they do that stuff, and you're like, you're criticizing the effects you do see, but a lot of times they're putting in effects you don't see. And you got to give their hats off to that kind of aspect on that. But I do think the effects are pretty solid for the most part. They're strange looking to me, though. I do like the digital enhancing and stuff. I don't know how I 100% feel about it, but Joe Castro always does pretty solid effects. He actually has a role in this one as well. And the way they tell this story, it's not exactly in chronological order all the time. There's a point where they show this murder and they play it for suspense, but then they kind of rewind a little bit to show the bumbling aspect because they didn't want to ruin that suspense. And I'm like, oh, that was clever and a little told out of the box in an aspect that you don't typically see. You know what I mean? I was like, oh, that was a little clever. I like the entire movie. I think it's well done. I don't think it's as gratuitous as one might think, highly sexual. It's not going to go headless or header or something like that when we're talking fucking heads. It is implied. They don't really show it. But they do show enough, I would say. And the performances lead, they carry this movie. I think it's well directed, and I think they did pretty good for a period piece on a budget, which is not something you can easily do. As far as the features, we have audition tapes, deleted scenes, interviews, lost ending, Kemper 70s Psycho documentary, commentary track, and music video. I would recommend checking Ed Kemper out, The True Story of an American Psycho. Great performance at the leads here. And another serial killer movie that I was actually impressed with. I thought Pig Killer was pretty decent as well, and I think Ed Kemper is a little better than that one, so check it out. Okay, next up is one from Full Moon Entertainment from 1990, and this is Meridian, directed by Charles Band, and this is filmed, I gotta be, in his classic kind of castle area. Cheryl Flynn is in here, pretty infamous actress, of course. Phil Fondacaro, Full Moon regular. We also have a story by Dennis Paoli, who wrote, some Stuart Gordon stuff, and Ghoulies 2. We have a score by Richard Band. So we got a lot of the regular people all back together in the Charlie Band camp, and Meridian is a movie that I had seen at one point a long time ago, and I was like, I don't really care for that, and I just don't really necessarily know what exactly they were going for. So around this time, you had that live action Beauty and the Beast with Ron Perlman or Linda Hamilton, and it's definitely kind of out of this vein, or maybe even something that would be like a low budget, Guillermo del Toro kind of picture, in a cross between Crimson Peak and Shape of Water. Not nearly in those kind of caliber of films, of course, by the budget, but I feel like, Charles Band was kind of trying to go for that. If you listen to him talk about stuff, he was never big into violence and gore and slashers. He, kind of liked his softcore nudity and monsters and science fiction. He was into the kind of weird, not necessarily the overly graphic, and nature. So this is kind of a Charles Band softcore universal horror film love story. It's kind of what I would go with. So what we have is, they have these two people are moving back to Italy. They're both artists. One, Cheryl Flynn, is from Italy originally. Her family owns this kind of castle, and she goes back and she's working on her art, and she comes back here, and her friend also is back restoring paintings. So they kind of meet up, and there's this traveling kind of carnival, if you will, and there's a immediate connection. They watch it, they enjoy it, but the friend invites them back to the castle, and they're kind of poisoned, and they're kind of taken advantage of sexually. But there is possibly two brothers here, not possibly, but there's these two brothers here, one evil and one good. But the good one is cursed forever, that he will turn into a monster every time he is sexually excited. So he's this kind of big, hairy, kind of crazy monster, and he needs, in the classic kind of Wolfman story, the love to break the curse. Only a person that loves you can kind of put an end to your misery, which came from the 1941 Wolfman, which is a great film and a cool idea as well. So, right. So that's kind of what we have here. It gets kind of like, bestiality kind of style thing. Cheryl Fenn is naked in here for sure. There's other nudity and sexy stuff if you're looking for it. I can't think of the old lady who plays the maid in here, but of course she's in Dolls and a couple other films. I can't remember the big one she's in. It's completely skipping my mind. But oh geez, she's in Don't Look Now. She's in Don't Look Now. Yes, she's one of the psychics. I think she actually is the psychic sister and everything like that. But she plays a nice little role in here. Good character. Overall, Meridian is decent. I don't think the lead baddie is necessarily the best actor in the world, but he's not horrible either. This one is okay. I would recommend Meridian. The first time I saw it, I didn't love it, but this time around, I'm like, yeah, that was kind of cool. There's not quite that many kind of movies like this, softcore monster movies, right? They're not really there, but also it has like good atmosphere. It's not just, it's genuinely kind of like, I don't want to say sensual, but it definitely has its attempts at sensual, and I do think it succeeds at certain times. It's got a good location. It's classic full moon, but there's a nice little old video zone on there, and I think that might be the only feature, except it is remastered and you got the 5.1 sound and all that nature like that. I think there is the original video zone, but I would recommend this one if you're into kind of fairy tale, softcore Charles Band flicks. Okay, we got one of the heavy hitters of 2025 coming up. We have Guillermo del Toro's Frankenstein. Yes, and I was definitely intrigued by this when you have one of the greatest, if not the greatest horror story ever told, written, I guess you'll say, and then you have one of the kind of directors who's really good at this kind of subject, like a fantasy horror element kind of deal, and Guillermo, then I was definitely going to be excited for this. It stars Oscar Isaacs, Charles Dance, Mia Goth, Christoph Waltz. Am I missing anyone else in this? I can't think of the actor who plays the actual creature's name, but he's in Saltburn. And yeah, the cast is tremendous. The acting is tremendous. I would really recommend it just on that alone. Now, here's what it is, and I saw somebody else talk about this too, Nathan Melander, who's directed a couple movies, and he's like a really good artist. He was talking about people complaining about the Frankenstein story. Hey, this isn't like this, or this isn't like the book. And I was reading a bit of it, and he's 100% right. Like, we all tend to do that, right? This isn't like the book if you read the book, but there's been a million Frankenstein stories, and even the favorite adaptations, like the Hammers and the Universals, aren't necessarily like the books, guys, right? Because it's just not exactly possible at the time. There's some similarities, but even Bride had to come out and add elements from the book in there. But so this one has its similarities to the book, of course, as it should, but there is differences here. This is kind of a movie about bad fathers, a story about redemption, a story, it's a love story, and it is about redemption. And I still go down here, and I gotta say that Dr. Frankenstein, the character, is the biggest literary prick of all time. He drives me crazy. He wants to play God, and he finally figures out what he was doing. And he gets it done. And then when he's done, there's a line in The Sins of Dorian Gray that I watched from '83 that I loved. When Anthony Perkins says, "The only thing worse than not getting what you want is getting what you want." And you're just like, you sit with it for a second. And you're like, oh shit, he's kind of right on that aspect, right? What's next? What do you do next? And when you have that, that void that couldn't be filled, and you fill it, what the fuck, it's not filled though, or you think it's gonna be filled when you do it. So like, he's obsessed with the idea of. Another line comes to me from Jurassic Park. You guys were so concerned about if you could do it, you never thought to stop to think, should you do it? And that's kind of the Frankenstein story element, right? Man playing God, he shouldn't play God, and when he does it, the Frankenstein has the Dr. Frankenstein puts his own problems into the monster that his father put into him. So that's the aspect here that is a lot different. I think that the father character, Charles Dance, is much different than the other father figures we saw in the Frankenstein other adaptations. The opening stuff, we do open with the cold kind of winter aspect on the boat, and I don't know what I was doing at first. I was like, I don't know if I like this. I'm really kind of what I wanted was subtlety, right? I kind of was looking for these subtle, kind of brilliant performances, and Oscar Isaacs in the very beginning is completely unrattled as he should be in the scene, and everybody's screaming, and it's completely big, and I'm like, this is like a Marvel movie or something, and I'm not into it. But then as we kind of start telling the story, I was like, oh, we're settling in here. It's a 2.5 hour movie. They gotta have to give you entertainment here, and I was like, I'm in. I was invested, and I thought that Oscar Isaacs, it's kind of a tongue twister for me, was really good in it. I thought that he was an actor that you needed that could do all the parts you needed, right? As a lead guy, you know, you can get a great character actor to pop in and do a scene here and there and just steal the show. But as an actor that the movie's with the entire time, to have this kind of huge, you know, arc and all that nature, I was like, oh, he's the man, because he's a very good actor, and he did a tremendous job. The stuff with Charles Dance, I think Charles Dance's performance, I was like, if this was made in a Hammer movie, he's playing like a Peter Cushing-esque character, and he's fantastic in it. But Mia Goth too is just picking all the great roles. She's working with all these great directors and whatnot, and she's doing a fantastic job, and she does a great job in this. I absolutely loved her, and the kinship that blossoms between Dr. Frankenstein and Mia Goth, I think, really worked well. I think that the monster's performance is wonderful and great, and I think it's my problems that I always had with Mary Shelley's Frankenstein, right, is that we don't have enough time with just the monster, especially with the old man and all that kind of stuff, and Frankenstein, the monster kind of learning and all that kind of shit like that. We don't have it in there, and this has plenty of it, and I think that stuff is brilliant. They also make the Frankenstein monster more powerful, I think, to a certain aspect, without spoiling too much. I think his performance is great. I think the old man is my favorite stuff. That scene's always touched me very well. The one knock on the movie is, spoiler here, it's not going to be a great spoiler, but one character literally says, "You're the monster, Dr. Frankenstein." No shit. Like, message, like, it's just so, I started laughing. I laughed out loud at that scene. It's just too much. Just, we know, it's obvious. But it is a tragedy, but there is redemption, and most Frankenstein stories don't have that. You know what I mean? It's just kind of, I wouldn't say they don't have that. Redemption is not that they don't have that. It's just that this one is a little bit more lighter in its ending than a lot of the other ones. I thought it was great. I thought it looked great. I thought it sounded great. I thought the acting was great. I thought there was a huge epic scale. It's a perfect movie to watch on Christmas break, or, you know, like this long, big, epic movie on Christmas. I think it's just perfect for that. It's not overly... it is violent. The monster is ripping motherfuckers apart. There's some gore and all that nature, and there's some really cool, you know, like kind of doctor stuff and all that kind of elements like that, and surgeries and nasty shit, and on the battlefield. All that stuff is really great. There's a lot of shout-outs to, you know, The Bride of Frankenstein and all that stuff in there as well, but I loved it. I didn't know I was going to love it, but after about 20 minutes, I fell in love with it. And there's told in 2 stories, and I love how they did that, because that's something you don't naturally always get to see like that. But, you know, and it does crack me up. The boat captain's like, yeah, you guys all stand out in the cold and do what I say. I'm going to go in this warm fucking cabin. But it is what it is, right? But highly recommend. It's on Netflix. Check it out. Okay, the next one from 2025 here is Queens of the Dead. That's right. This is a new zombie movie directed by Romero and Tina Romero, George Romero's daughter. There we go. So I was pretty excited, but I was very skeptical. I didn't know, because, you know, George Romero had such trouble getting budgets for his latter-day movies. I was like, how low budget is Queens of the Dead going to be? And I'm like, not that I wouldn't watch a low budget movie, but I'm just saying that it might just hold it back to, like, you know, and actually hurt it. So I popped this in, and I was pleasantly surprised that it did have a decent budget. Now, this is definitely a lot of, you know, a gay story. I don't think it's overly preachy or anything of that aspect. I know a lot of people, it's not that they're upset with messages, they just don't want to be constantly hit over the head with it. I don't have a problem as long as the movie it does whatever it's supposed to do well and gets its message across, if it has one or doesn't have one, but as long as it doesn't come across as just sloppy. And I don't think that Queens of the Dead did come across sloppy. I think that, you know, a lot of people are probably expecting something that's going to be like this ultra, you know, super pro-gay thing or something along those lines, and I do think it is that, but I don't think that it's something that is going to be, you know, alienating the people that are pieces of shit. I shouldn't say it, I guess, you know what I mean? Like, I say it, but I don't think it's as alienating as possibly some people do think it would be, like, you know, if they don't want to watch something along these lines. It's not as sexually explicit or anything along those lines or anything like that. But yeah, I think the main kind of message here is people being sucked into social media, you know, like everything is monetized and everybody's trying to make money and monetize everything. That hustle culture that's stuck in your phone. So it does have like aspects that remind me a lot of like Shaun of the Dead, and it's like, and it's comedy, and of course, you know, the Romeroisms. My number one favorite thing about it is that you know, it used Day of the Dead score within its score, and it hit it well enough, but you can still hear it, and it's my all-time favorite movie and one of my all-time favorite scores. I think it's George Romero's most underrated score. I think it's one of the most underrated scores of all time. And I think people talk about Dawn a lot, which is a great score, but I think Day of the Dead is one of the most underrated scores ever by John Harrison. And this score in here is actually really good. It's mixed with it and everything like that. This movie is a big part siege movie. It has a lot of character arcs, where the characters are overcoming all these things and whatnot, which I kind of enjoyed. I was surprisingly invested in the characters, which I didn't necessarily think I was going to be invested in the characters. You have your classic character who doesn't know this life or doesn't like this life, but he ends up kind of, being related to someone and comes in, and he has a lot of funny lines, and he actually ended up being one of my favorite characters in the movie. We have like a former drag queen that's given up the life and has to come back into the life and find herself and find that part of herself again. The gore is decent. The special effects are decent. The comedy's pretty decent as well. There's nothing that that bothered me in those aspects. I thought it was decent. I like the characters. I like the social messaging within it. I love the score. I thought the special effects were cool. I love that it took place in New York. You don't often see a zombie movie in New York, and I like that the zombies can be controlled with their cell phones instead of skyflowers like in Land of the Dead or something along those aspects. There is numerous George Romero shout-outs here, which I don't necessarily want to spoil, but there's a couple actors that pop up that I think people will register, and there's maybe possibly a drinking beverage that I think people will immediately relay to George Romero, which I thought was great. I think that this is a pretty good movie, especially I think this is her debut, and I was impressed with it. I was happy with it. I liked the characters were well developed. The stinger at the end, I'm like, I always kind of hate the stingers and everything like that. I also love that the idea takes place on Easter. You see a lot of Easter bunnies, Jesus' resurrection. What a better time to have a zombie movie outbreak during the resurrection of Jesus on Easter. It's his resurrection on Easter, yeah, but it's kind of just funny and crazy that, the zombies are coming alive on Easter. It's pretty twisted, but it's not necessarily the reason, but there was always that backdrop in the Romero movies, right? When there's no more room in hell, at least the characters had that idea. And then also, Day of the Dead, God has visited a curse on us. So there's always that element in the kind of the backdrop that the religious implications of, the zombies are coming back and whatnot. But they also give you another reason as well in here. But I enjoyed it. It's a lot of fun and much better than I actually expected. Good characters, good gore. There's some silly stuff, but that's kind of be expected. There's some CGI that I don't love, but I would recommend Queens of the Dead coming to Shudder. You can rent it right now.
I have returned.
Okay. Show me.
Where is the music now? The sound of laughter. There was never laughter.
What's it like?
What's what like?
Screwing a psycho.
What the fuck was that?
It's gone.
God blows dead dogs. Just lay it in there.
Eat shit and die, Ricky!
Eat shit and live, Bill.
Yeah, Bill, he's a little wet.
31. 32. 32. Year of a man's prime. Loved by many women. He might still learn to swim. 32. Going. Gone.
The kid was cut in half, Arnie. They had to scrape his legs up with a shovel.
Well, isn't that what you're supposed to do with shit? Scrape it up with a little shovel.
One final moment of revenge.
Wondering what's real. All of it is real.
You want to see something really scary?
You bet.
Really?
Yeah.
Get the video, Joe! Long live the new flesh!
No choice but to kill the son of a bitch.
entire life in a state of fear. It is all I have ever known. Fear.
Are you ready? Okay, go ahead. What are you doing?
Okay, next up here is the 1983 movie, and this is The Alchemist. Directed by Charlie Band again. He originally wasn't supposed to direct this. This is good old lightning video here with Robert Ginty. Yeah, it's Robert Ginty from The Exterminator and everybody's favorite Whitefire. But yeah, so The Alchemist. This is a VHS tape that I have had for years. This is a movie that I've always wanted to watch for years. This is a part Empire, of course, Pictures, and what is this? Lawrence Applebaum. But yeah, so standard plot here. We have kind of I think it starts off in a period piece kind of setting, and somebody is cursed. Some love relationship here. The guy from Parasite is actually in here. The guy carrying a parasite, and he's like an evil warlock, and he's trying to steal this woman away. And you know, Robert Ginty's not going to have it, and he ends up getting cursed. We fast forward to the modern day, and we have this bizarre woman kind of driving, and she picks up this hitchhiker, and this is the weirdest hitchhiker scene shit, where they back and forth, and she seems completely unhinged, and they're arguing and whatnot. But they kind of form a relationship and a bond, and she starts to kind of go mental because like she's getting like tied into the past, kind of relays and all that kind of shit like that. They end up in the woods, and they meet who appears to be, it ends up being Robert Ginty's daughter. Robert Ginty hasn't aged, but he's cursed to live as this monster, and of course there's going to be demons coming from the kind of the villain alchemist, or I don't know who actually would be the alchemist here. And the demons are really cool. They're fun. They look like giant gate creatures, of course not as good or as well done or anything like that. But gory, gooey stuff going on. It takes too long to get started. The story is a little kind of sloppy, but overall The Alchemist is just a standard, you know, kind of, hey, I popped in this cheap movie and watched it, and it's not horrible, it's not great. Robert Ginty is very subdued in here. He's not kind of the over-the-top character that I guess I necessarily see him in the next film that I'm going to talk about from 1983. But yeah, I'm glad I finally checked The Alchemist off my watch list. It was one that I had known about for years and seen parts of, but never finished it. Also has one of the dumbest deaths of, you know, a person here. They accidentally killed themselves, and I'm just like, ugh, eye roll. Come on, guys. He's not going to fall through a fucking spike like that. But it is what it is. The Alchemist. Check it out. Okay, next up is Scarab, also starring Robert Ginty from 1983. This is a United States-Spanish co-production, but for some reason, to me, it feels like an Italian-Japanese movie. Just the weird elements here. But this movie is fucking bonkers. Rip Torn is, I guess, a scientist of sorts, and he ends up kind of unleashing this ancient god or whatnot, and he's kind of hit with this force. He's supposed to be a Nazi, according to the plot, but I don't know where that is. And we kind of fast forward. Robert Ginty is, I think, American correspondent somewhere, and he witnesses this political figure kill themselves. It's kind of happening everywhere, and it's causing the entire world economy to collapse. So he starts to get involved with this case. It kind of leads him to the daughter of Rip Torn somewhat, and they team up. But at the same time, there's these kind of people from Rip Torn's cult kind of chasing him around, one of which who has finger guns and shooting bombs at him with the finger. And it's kind of like this Final Destination, a complete batshit scene where he's walking down the street and the cars are exploding left and right, and it's actually pretty well done. Robert Ginty is a weird character in this. Within the first like 10 minutes of the movie, he's like going to this, crashing this party and trying to sleep with this random woman, and it's just weird. And he's just like kind of reminds me of lightweight Michael Moriarty and like Q or something along those lines, or the stuff where he's just unhinged and weird, and I don't know what the fuck he's doing. But yeah, so after that, we kind of cut back to Rip Torn a lot during this movie, and we see him just kind of wandering around with his like many followers who are just bare-breasted and dancing, and I'm like, I don't know what's going on. But Rip Torn's saying some weird shit. He's acting really weird and bizarre. But it is a strange film, and it's kind of like fragmented in a lot of ways. It's just a weird, bizarre thing that doesn't really, it's not 100% coherent. The director of this movie is more of a producer. You know, he directed stuff like Demon Seed and along those lines, and Near Dark. So he has some big movies under his belt. But Scarab is a bizarre, weird one that is worth a watch just because it's sheer oddity. And, you know, the little bugs are basically put on guys, the Scarabs, the beetles, to, it's kind of a marker to be killed along those lines. But, yeah, I don't kind of have like a weird kind of battle towards father and daughter at the very end. But overall, Scarab is just too weird to remember every detail or make sense of it. But I wouldn't say don't watch it. I would say give it a spin and see how weird it is. Okay, the next one from 1983 is A Polish Vampire in Burbank, starring Mark Pirro, directed by Mark Pirro. I don't know if it's necessarily his directorial debut. He directed a couple shorts, one of which was like 46 minutes or something like that. But, I guess at the time, this would have been considered his directorial debut. He'd go on to direct Nudist Colony of the Dead, a wild musical from 1981. And he also did Curse of the Queer Wolf, which Queer Wolf actually character pops up in this one. His movies always have like a gay, weird element to them that are kind of funny and quirky and weird. But yeah, this one here is A Polish Vampire in Burbank. So a movie came out a couple years ago called Humanist Vampire, seeking suicidal person along those lines. And that's not a new idea, that reluctant vampire, the vampire who doesn't want to kill somebody. Hell, I even think there's a Tales from the Crypt episode with Malcolm McDowell called The Reluctant Vampire. So the idea, right, Brad Pitt didn't want to kill people, he ate rats and shit, in Interview with the Vampire. So yeah, that's what we have here. But the idea that we have this family, right, we have this father and daughter that are, bloodsuckers that go out and they bring their son, Mark Pirro, fresh blood. And he doesn't like the idea of biting a woman on the neck. He can't get into it. He doesn't love it. And they talk about his brother, what happened to his brother in Eddie Deason, second movie from 1983 that he's in. And his brother, Eddie Deason, was in a similar fashion. And he ends up having passed away. But what happens is in American Werewolf in London fashion, we have the skeleton of Eddie Deason with this ridiculous voice falling over Mark Pirro and trying to give him advice on how to bite a woman. It's really silly. It's really funny. It's really quirky. But, much to the luck of Mark Pirro, he meets this girl named Laurie Sutton who's obsessed with vampires. She wants to go to all the movies. She seems to have a fetish for vampires. And it seems like a match made in heaven or hell, if you will. But, he can't steal the deal because he is a freaking nervous wreck. But a love story kind of blossoms and it gets drawn out and everything along that nature. But I don't want to spoil absolutely everything. But it's cute. It's funny. There's some good gags in here, especially with the Queer Wolf character popping up, which is absolutely insane. He has one of the funniest lines in here about being bisexual that's made me laugh out loud. And it does one of my favorite lines from the Wolfman, which is the second time brought up, when the moon is full. Like that. But just on that aspect that he's like a bisexual, which cracked me up. This is a really cute, fun, low-budget movie, which I would recommend. And it definitely is a big precursor to Humanist Vampire. Kind of the same family dynamic and joke and all that kind of stuff like that. And even the ideas. Like, I'd be so hard pressed. They had to have seen this because it's the same story, really, except on a budget with Eddie Deason. But yeah, this is an enjoyable movie. If you haven't seen Polish Vampire in Burbank, I'd check it out. Okay, the last from 1983 is The Cradle Will Fall. This is a TV film by John Moxley, who did Night Stalker, This House, Possessed, I think. No Place to Hide. I get those two confused. But he did a bunch of TV films as well. He did one from the 70s, The House Where Evil Lives, if I'm not mistaken. But a lot of TV films. Good director. He did The City of the Dead with Christopher Lee, an exceptional kind of gothic horror style thing. So he's got a lot of good, horror cred under his belt. This stars Laura Hutton from American Gigolo, who's, a unique looking actress. I really like how she looks. I kind of like her performances when I see her pop up, but she's got a great look about it. She looks, like an adult woman, and she's like attractive at the same time and just a good actress. So it's like a rare kind of combination in those aspects, right? Where like it's rare to sexualize, like a middle-aged woman back in the 80s and stuff. But I'm like, yeah, keep doing it. Like, that's good. It's just so much better than like in the movies. It's always teenagers and all that aspect. But, I think it's kind of refreshing and that she was like kind of like knockout in American Gigolo. But, as an older lady. So this one is very talky, very long. James Ferrantino is also in it from The Dead and Buried, and the final, is it The Final Conflict is the one, the submarine one, right? But yeah, I love him in Dead and Buried. It's a great movie. He plays kind of a mad scientist doctor. I guess that's where the horror aspects come from. Those are the most kind of horror aspects in the film. But yeah, what we have here is a bunch of people, women have been kind of randomly dying from this kind of practice, and this one woman kind of witnesses he starts to kill this guy. This woman dies, and he wants to make it look like an accident or that she committed suicide, so he can get out of here and continue practicing his medicine. At the same time, Laura Hutton is like, I don't know exactly what she is. She's like not a DA, but she works for the DA office, and she has a relationship with the pathologist and whatnot. And they have this like kind of shaky relationship where they're not really necessarily sure what's going to go on. Laura Hutton's trying to get over, her fear of hospitals, the death of loved ones. All this kind of stuff like that in that aspect. So that plays into it and kind of bloats the runtime. I guess this was based on a book, if I'm not mistaken. Sure seems like it because there's a lot of subplots that, like, in the as far as like a crisp TV movie would be, like, not needed, but not horrible either. So William H. Macy pops up in here as one of the kind of pathologists as well. But yeah, it's kind of a mystery police procedural, figuring it out, countdown before it's too late, kind of save this kind of character. James Ferrantino is good. He's kind of creepy in here. Laura Hutton is good. Ben Murphy is good. All the acting is solid. It's a pretty decent TV movie. Nothing amazing, but nothing, horrible either. I would recommend checking it out if you're in the TV films. I think there's some cool aspects about it, but I don't think it's going to knock your socks off, and I don't think it's necessarily a, in-your-face horror film either. Okay, my Patreon pick is fucking Air Bud 2 Golden Receiver. Thank you, Dan the cameraman. Made a year later, Kevin Zegers, whatever, pops back up as the young kid. The main actor that I noticed in here is Robert Costanzo, who is in like Total Recall and Die Hard 2. He's the guy in Total Recall who's like, Recall! and he ends up getting killed by Arnold and whatnot. And he plays a football coach in this movie, and he's really good in this. So Air Bud now lives, of course, with the family. All that has been settled. The bad guys in this one are basically a pair of like people like Eastern Europeans that run a circus. They need a final act. They see the Air Bud ran on stage and played some football or some shit or basketball. So they see that him in the news, and they're like, we got to get this dog for our movies. This whole stuff is a subplot. It sucks. It's stupid. It's basically just these two Eastern European people tripping on skateboards and every stupid gag that you could think of, and slapstick comedy that doesn't really work, and randomly other animals popping up like monkeys being like, you fell. Kids stupid bullshit, And I'm saying this is a kids film, so I know judging it on my level is ridiculous, but there are still kids films that I can watch, like Little Monsters or Ernest Scared Stupid, or even something along the newer, like hell, even if you put in something like Wreck-It Ralph, they're still good movies, even if they're not for you, or we're not, or you're older. This is not. This is just a bad movie overall. I'm not a big fan of the first Air Bud. I don't think it holds up. I think it's really stupid, and this one's even dumber. I mean, the dog's in a goddamn fucking football uniform with a helmet. Leather helmet. I mean, you really have to be high to enjoy and watch this stupid thing, but it is what it is. I think that some people may get a kick out of it, but so the football coach, the kid decides to join the football team because he wants to get girls, and his buddy says this is the best way to do it, so they join the football team. He gets into it, but Air Bud doesn't want to sit on the sidelines. Air Bud's got to get in the game, so they're definitely deflating the balls, maybe some like Tom Brady shit, and he's catching it with his teeth. I don't know. That was the whole, remember that bullshit? Wasn't that like Tom Brady was like, he's deflating balls? Well, Air Bud's deflating the fucking balls too, so he can catch him with his fucking teeth. There's a hilarious scene where he gets like tackled by somebody, and you're just like, shut up, man. Like, this is so stupid. But Robert Costanzo, the actor, he is so good in this, and the best he could do, because he's literally like, I always wanted to play a football coach, and I want to be inspirational and tell the kids to have fun, but I got to play it in a movie where I'm coaching a fucking dog. But he's good. He's that kind of character type, stereotype, always eating, but I think he does a really good job. He's a good actor. And Kevin Zegers, he would go on to have a big career. He's in the Dawn of the Dead remake and a bunch of movies. He's not a bad kid actor. It's just a really bizarre thing that there's like 14 Air Buds, and it just gets dumber and dumber and dumber. It's like Ernest P. World, speaking of Ernest Scared Stupid. It gets dumber and dumber and dumber. I don't have anything to say about this. I can't say anything nice about it. Even the first one, I was like, at least got Michael Jeter in it. But this one doesn't. Like, this one has Robert Costanzo, and he's fine. But I don't know what to tell you. It's and I was reading reviews. Somebody said the worst of the series, and I mean, fuck, there's like 14 of these. It's insane. It's nonsense. If you give me movies like this, I'll try my best, but this is probably what's going to happen. I'm sorry. Let's get in these questions, comments, and concerns. This comment smells of death. Deluxe box sets of Hisayasu Sato films. What a time to be alive. If you're looking for a newer Sato film to watch, one of my favorites of his is 2017's The I Dream. As an English-friendly Japanese Blu-ray release, it would make a perfect Christmas gift for any card-carrying pervert in your life. Though if eyeball licking gives you the ick, you might want to avoid it. I agree with your comment about wanting to see Japanese TV series films get picked up for release by Western Blu-ray companies. That's a real treasure trove of stuff from the 70s, 80s, and early 90s. It's ripe for discovery. Though I'd imagine getting a hold of a good source elements for some of them might be tricky. As someone who is a big fan of Japanese ghost cat movies, I really enjoyed Obayashi's Legend of the Cat Monster. It's like the Sunset Boulevard of ghost cat films. Even this fact that once popular ghost cat genre was practically dead when Obayashi's film came out plays into the story's themes. I also thought the casting of Takato Eri and her real-life look-alike daughter, Wakaba, to play the actress in the film was genius. Eri was known as the queen of the ghost cat genre, and she appeared in a string of Dai-produced ghost cat films in the 50s. Great show as always. Yeah, I should have mentioned that, and I meant to mention that. I completely forgot. Yeah, the Die Gothic box set actually has a little supplemental feature about her in general and her life and everything like that. So yeah, great point out. That's also great to read these comments because people fill in all the gaps that I missed. Beyond Sour's Ground. Hey, Mr. Parker, what would you say is the entry point into the pink film genre? I love some of the samurai exploitation films like Shogun Assassin and Lady Snowblood, but I don't really see those films described as pinky films. Last year I watched Sex and Fury, which was solid, but I wasn't overly impressed by it. Been collecting the Cauldron Films releases, so I might take a chance on Zero Woman Handcuffs next, Red Handcuffs next. That's a good one. I think you'll like it. When it comes to stuff like Nikatsu films, I'm a loss for where to even begin, and I'm not even entirely sure that's a side of the genre I wanted to delve deep into. But it's also interesting to hear reviews of those films, especially since nearly no one else is reviewing those titles. I'd go towards the horror stuff if you. Oh yeah, sorry. Give myself a little note here. So, like pinky movies, I think generally have to be listen to the supplemental stuff. They have to be outside the studio. So, like Nikatsu's films aren't pinky, and Toei's pinky violence aren't technically Toei. But if you're, I imagine you're more of a horror fan. So, I would recommend maybe tackling something like Entrails of a Beautiful Woman and Entrails of a Virgin, and those got this horror kind of spin on them. Maybe take those out and watch those. The third one is more of a torture porn thing. And I don't think it's bad. I just don't think it's up to snuff as Entrails of a Beautiful Woman and Entrails of a Virgin. I think those two. And I think I would grab some Sada movies. I think I would start with Celluloid Nightmares. I think that's the one it's called, yeah. AKA, it has so many different titles. What is the other title? Not Pleasure Kill. Is it Pleasure Kill? No, I think that's the other one. But I would recommend that one as well. That Sato set, I think, is a good starting point, you know. As far as stuff that is older, maybe start with the Koji Wakamatsu film Violated Angels if you're into serial killer stories, and tackle it. It's a Richard Speck, based his story on the Richard Speck murders, but Japanese style. And just kind of give yourself a look at it. I mean, the genres go everywhere. I've seen some, if you want to see something real nasty from the Nikatsu line, you know, Star of David Hunting Beautiful Girls is crazy. Or if you want to see something that makes light of dark subjects, watch White Rose Campus. But there's so many weird-ass movies from that, you know. But if you're looking for straight pinky, don't go with the Nikatsu, because those are, you know, professionally well-done movies in the vein of a pinky movie. But, yeah, I would recommend checking out stuff like Entrails of a Beautiful Woman and Entrails of a Virgin. He also says, I also have to check out Legend of the Cat Monster. I can only hope when death comes for me that I'll turn into a film projector. Speaking of Surf... Oh, wait, sorry. Yeah, speaking of Surf 2, did you meet Eddie Deason at Wasteland? I only spoke with him briefly, but he was friendly. I did not. I wish I would have. Also, you need to make a movie or at a very least short film about the Corn Man. I keep hearing about the Corn Man and I want to see this monster. If you could find someone to produce it, I'll start writing a treatment. LOL. I don't know. My movie making days are over. But I would... it'd be hard to say no to the Corn Man, right? The Green Valley Campground Corn Man. Bill Clay. I learned something new recently about Full Metal Jacket. The guy in the helicopter shooting the people in the field was going to play the original drill instructor part, but R. Lee Ermey stole it from him, and I'm glad he did. I think the guy tried suing Kubrick, but lost, and Kubrick gave him that bit part as an apology. Interesting. Comic Surgery. Are you watching Boots on Netflix? I am not. Let me know what it is. You know, I'm not big on TV. But Espinito here, 81 Oak Ridge. Dave, I left a comment in the past video and didn't check if you responded, but I really would love to hear your opinion on the Saw movies that have been released on 4K and its censored theatrical versions. The Saw movies I couldn't care less about, but the Devil's Rejects and even 70s genre films like Fight for Your Life 77, which is an all-time favorite film of mine, are being blackballed. Left on DVD to rot. Story about the film elements are completely untrue, as if I was told from several people. And if they would lie about film elements being destroyed or a lesser-known film like Fight for Your Life, then why would they believe that Lionsgate is being honest about the director's cut of Devil's Rejects? You know, I don't know who to trust. I don't trust anybody when it comes to that kind of stuff, to be honest. There's so many times they're like, elements are lost, and then somebody's like, we're releasing it, and the elements are not lost. They never were. But, you know, I think it's bullshit. I am all against censorship. If you're going to release a 4K, it should be the definitive edition with both cuts on there, especially the director's cut. I'm not buying fucking Devil's Rejects and the non-director's cut. And I also don't care about the Saw films, but releasing the Saw films rated is fucking dumb. Trash. Throw them in the garbage. Audio love. I remember watching Full Metal Jacket and being blown away, pardon the pun, by the change Vincent D'Onofrio made from what I believe is an actual screen performance and on-screen performance, debut performance in Adventures in Babysitting to this film. Two completely different characters, films, and looks. Bravo. I agree, he's great. Nick's for Flanders. I've been thinking about whether or not I should watch Black Phone 2. While I do generally like and enjoy most Scott Derrickson's work, sometimes he leaves me a tad frustrated. Not returning the helm to the ship that was Sinister Part 2. I wouldn't call that movie a disaster, but it wasn't the best of all, despite James Ranson's fine performance. When it comes to his Christian films, I don't feel he's all that preachy, but hey, I'm a Catholic more or less. I would check out Black Phone 2. I really like the first one, and as Mr. Derrickson has in fact directed this one, it has to be at least as good, if not better. Yeah, I would say so. As for those who cry foul and call this Nightmare on Elm Street ripoff, you all saw the piss poor excuse for a remake, right? Even the actors that were in it, as well as the director, have disowned it. Full Metal Jacket, what a roller coaster ride. So wild it leaves you disoriented, almost sick, but I would say it's required viewing, especially if you enjoy the works of Mr. Kubrick, such a tour de force performance from Vincent D'Onofrio and the late, great R. Lee Ermey. I used to hate his character, but now I am an old man, and I can understand in part where he came from. Marines are the vanguard. They might be the last line of defense, and if one link in the chain is weak, it all goes to hell in a handbasket, right? Questions. You mentioned that at times you felt preached to during a Scott Derrickson movie. I've had similar feelings during other films. Is this because these films are generally pro-Christian propaganda, or because maybe some of these directors were simply raised Catholic and informs their creative decisions, or because our current society is turning fervently anti-Christian? It depends, you know what I mean? I don't know if every society is turning anti-Christian. I don't think that America is necessarily. I think that there's plenty of people that are pro-Christian in America and many people that are anti-Christian. You know what I mean? I think that just people's voices are getting louder on the matter on both of it. But Hollywood's not going to be the place that's going to be ultra pro-Christian, to be honest. It's not necessarily all Scott Derrickson's movies, and I don't really have a problem with like people being Christian in movies or whatever. I don't give a shit. It's just that there always is like a hammy little thing in there. Like in this one, there was like an anti like marijuana smoking thing, and it was like it came at like this weird Christian kind of element here. And I do think a lot of it is that just he writes what he knows, and that's what he knows. But it's also it comes across as corny to me at times. The only one that actually ever bothered me, and I think it hurt the film, to be honest, is only one, and I think it's The Exorcism of Emily Rose, because it's based on a true story, and it's taking the death of someone and manipulating it to you put your point of view across. And that's the only one that I would actually say feels like 100% Christian propaganda to me, is The Exorcism of Emily Rose. Although the lead performance in here by the actual possessed girl, I can't think of her name else, and Jennifer Carpenter, is fantastic, and I think the actual possession stuff is fantastic too. I just think that a lot of it comes across as complete propaganda crap, but that's just me. And it doesn't really matter, you know what I mean? I can't tell you exactly what's in this guy's brain. How do you think you would fare as a professional soldier or even a Marine? I have no idea, man. It depends on my mood and time and day and all that kind of stuff and where I was at life. Right now, at 39 years old, not well. I watched Anthony Schaefer's Frenzy, Sleuth, The Wicker Man. What the hell? I watched Anthony Schaefer's, Absolution, featuring Richard Burton last night. Very chilling, set at a Catholic public school, which Americans would call private school. Confusing, I know. It details the fast decline of the relationship between a priest and his two pupils. Do you think that posh private schools always create teenage monsters or deeply traumatized young people? Till next time, God willing, your show is always a blam to my crazy frizzled brain after a long week. To this question, do you think it details the fact, when Americans call private schools? Well, in America, they are private schools. You have to pay your tuition to go to them. They're not public. They're not open to the public unless the person applies for like a grant or whatever the fuck or whatever it is. You know, it's all different. Different schools, different, all that kind of stuff. But do you think that they are private in America? That's all I'm saying. Do you think that posh private schools always create teenage monsters, deeply traumatized young people? I never would say always ever. You know, always is a word that probably shouldn't be used in terms of that kind of all. You know what I mean? It's not like 2 + 2 is always 4. If it is the actual 2 + 2, you know what I mean? It's saying always. You can't. I would never say that. I don't know. I didn't go to a private school. I mean, I think that they always make the element, private schools with the priests, kids got raped, so that's what caused them, and stuff like that. And I don't know anything about that kind of stuff personally. so I can't really answer those questions, to be honest. And saying that, I never went to a private school. I think that a kid could get traumatized at any school, to be honest. So I don't know about that stuff. Jason Bovey, I saw Scalps on double feature tape with the Slayer as a rental back in the 80s. Enjoyed the low-budget, gritty goriness of the slasher, although Slayer was better. 7 out of 10. I thought for sure this movie you had already seen. You know, it was one that had a bad reputation for so long, and I bought it so many times. I was like, I'll just wait on Scalps until I eventually watched it. Ken Coakley, again, this is the second time in 3 weeks. I noticed there was some comments not being posted. I had nothing to do with it. I record this every Thursday afternoon, probably like 3:30 to 5 is when I record these every Thursday. So if your comment's not in there by then, that's that's on you guys. But if you posted before that and it didn't show up, I can't do anything about that. The YouTube had a bunch of things. I know Explosive Action was talking to me. He's like, I posted like 2 times, 3 times. It never showed up, and it eventually did show up. So there was an issue with that stuff. And it wasn't held either. You know, it wasn't like getting blocked or anything. Sometimes they'll automatically block stuff if they think it's spam when it's not. Way Up Dude gives me the thumbs up. Thank you. Elk Vomit. What's the story behind the lone Godzilla VHS tape on the shelf? Godzilla vs. Bellante? I don't know why, but I always stare at it when you're talking. Is it your favorite Godzilla film? Why only one VHS? Well, you see, my VHS collection, I had much more years ago, but I kept a lot, and when I started upgrading them, I got rid of some, which was a bad idea. This was years ago. This was like in 2000, so maybe before. But if you notice, they're in alphabetical order up here. You can't see up here. But, you know, you have some, like, weird stuff like Tempe Video, Video Outlaw, Alternative Home Cinema, and then Todd Sheet stuff, and some low-budget weird shit. But then you go in alphabetical order, and most of that stuff was stuff that wasn't on DVD or Blu-ray or any of that stuff. But then a lot of that stuff's since been released, but it's still in alphabetical order. And then afterwards, these were all stuff that I had at one point boxed up that I literally just took out of the box and put on the shelf in a random order. So I do have a few Godzilla movies here. You know, as a kid, Godzilla 85 was a favorite. Godzilla vs. Bellante. I think I have Godzilla vs. the Sea Monster here, but I don't have all the Godzillas. It's not like I collected the Godzilla tapes. You know, a lot of these tapes were even probably from my initial, some of them were my first VHS collection, although some of them are. You know, a lot of these were probably when I was in like my late teens, early 20s, and I just go to like a store and they would have them on sale. So you'd see something like, hey, this movie, Demon Son, whatever the fuck this is. It was like 2 for $1, you know. So I bought this in 2010. If you could see that right on the side there, it says that. But Demon Stone was 50 cents. So that's when I said a lot of these. But, you know, something like The Video Dead was probably from my original collection, probably when I was in my like 12 or 13 years old. So, you know, like I still have that tape. And although it was released on Blu-ray, it was at that point then where I was like, I just can't part with my Video Dead. So I left my Video Dead. And that happened sometimes it didn't. So I stopped getting rid of my tapes at a certain point, but I had already done a lot of damage, like the Nightmare on Elm Street, the Friday 13th, a lot of the big titles like that. Hell, even my Shatter Dead tape. So there's a lot of shit that I used to have that I no longer have. So the randomness of the VHS collection below a certain point is just random. What else? We got some more questions here. Ken Coakley. A couple weeks ago, a viewer asked you how long you would wait for an autograph at a show. Your reply was that you waited an hour. It might have been a couple, I don't know, to see George Romero. That answer reminded me of when I met Romero. I was at 2005 Rock and Shock. The first Rock and Shock was in 2004, and the only one I missed because I hadn't known about it. The first one had a Dawn of the Dead reunion, and while I caught up with the others, I never got to meet David Emge. Anyway, I did. He's a cool guy. Anyway, at the 2005 one, I stood in line with my best friend, who also happens to be a very beautiful woman. We stood in line for nearly 2 hours. We both had severe chronic pain, yet we weren't affected by the wait. I chalk it up to adrenaline for both of us. I was starstruck and my best friend was starstruck over Ken Ford because his iconic line in the movie about the dead walking in Earth. Anyway, standing behind us was a guy who showed my friend a script for a film that he and his friend were working on about a giant carnivorous snapping turtle. I also looked it over what dialogue wasn't exactly Quentin Tarantino material. He said he was going to give a copy to Romero, hoping that Romero would direct or produce. I told him that he only directs the films he writes except Stephen King. My friend scolded me for popping their balloon. There's a documentary about the unfinished movie called Snapper on Screenbox. Now I watched Full Metal Jacket last night. I'm not some self-described cinephile who worships the altar of Kubrick or Tarantino. Still like some of Kubrick's films, but not all of them. I'm not big on Barry Lyndon, Lolita, and Eyes Wide Shut. Full Metal Jacket is one of the better ones. I don't think it was the same effect if Tim Kocheri had stayed cast as Hartman instead of Ermey. Kocheri got another shot by appearing in Leprechaun in Space. D'Onofrio should have been nominated for an Oscar. Adam Baldwin was great as Animal Mother. He's great at playing a tough guy roles. He looks the part. I would agree with that. I would. He's very good in it, but I think D'Onofrio and Lee Ermey are fucking electric. Amazing performances. And Matthew Modine is fantastic too. That's a hard role to play, and I think he does great. Let's do the update here. The Criterion sale a little bit. We have the Heroic Trio and the Executioners here. Double feature 4K. I've wanted to see these. These look like great, super entertaining fantasy kind of kung fu. Not kung fu, but fantasy kind of action things. Then we have it's not Rogue, Rouge. Here, kind of a like love ghost story. Always sounded good to me. Wanted to check it out. Another Hong Kong one, if I'm not mistaken here. Always heard good things. And then we have Querelle with Brad Davis and Franco Nero by Rainer Werner Fassbinder. And I've always heard this is an absolute crazy movie. I should have watched it for 80. Is it 81? 82. I should have watched it for 82. It's not a horror film, but it is a cult film. I should have watched it for 82. Maybe I'll pop it in. Always been interested in that one. But that is the update, guys. Let's get out of here. All right, guys. Thank you very much for watching. And as always, have a good one.